Okay, how's it going, everybody? I hope it's all good. Okay, so in this episode, what I want to try to do is to briefly say something about the Danish philosopher Kierkegaard and his view on religious faith. And the work of his that I have mostly in mind here is one called Fear and Trembling, where he discusses the biblical story of Abraham and Isaac. You know, where God commands Abraham to sacrifice his only son, Isaac. Okay, so before I get into that work specifically, let me first just say something very generally about Kierkegaard's outlook here. So, I don't think it's controversial to say that Kierkegaard is one of the most passionate voices for religious faith. You see, for Kierkegaard, trying to prove definitively that God exists is pretty much pointless. And this is basically because he thinks that our reasoning capacities are limited when it comes to the metaphysical, or as he sometimes calls it, the unknown. So what he thinks is that we have to stop trying to prove God's existence with rational or logical means, or we have to stop striving for objective certainty. And instead, what we have to do is to just pull back and let go and let the reality of his existence express itself to us. Faith begins where thinking leaves off, he says. Actually, more specifically, what Kierkegaard encourages us to do is to stop our dispassionate intellectualizing and instead to perform an act of will or to take a leap of faith. When we let go of our compulsion for absolute certainty and just take a blind but passionate leap of faith instead, we'll be rewarded by experiencing the reality of God in something like non-rational ways. Okay, but now what does all this have to do with the story of Abraham and Isaac? Well, okay, so what Kierkegaard does in his book, Fear and Trembling, is he interprets this story in Genesis as the greatest example of what it means to have faith. Specifically, of course, Abraham's obedient response to God's command to sacrifice his only son, Isaac. Now, for Kierkegaard, Abraham's obedience here is the paradigm of faith because there doesn't seem to be any rational basis. No reliable evidence for Abraham to appeal to in making his decision to kill his son. In this way, Kierkegaard praises Abraham for just willing and acting and doing rather than, thinking or reasoning about things too much. Okay, but there's more. So what Kierkegaard is also getting us to see is that what God is asking Abraham to do is not only intellectually absurd, but also, maybe most importantly, it's unethical. So this seems to be part of Kierkegaard's point. Namely, that we just can't understand Abraham's behavior in ethical terms. That from the point of view of ethics, Abraham is simply nothing more than the murderer of his own son, or at least guilty of attempted murder. In other words, what Abraham seems to be doing is subordinating his duties as a father to his personal relationship with God. Now, it's really important to understand that Kierkegaard doesn't trivialize this. And this is what makes his analysis so intriguing and persuasive, even though, of course, there's a fair amount of poetical and theological license on his part. That's to say, what he thinks is often omitted from the Genesis story is Abraham's anxiety. And so he constantly reminds us of the full terror Abraham must have experienced in his encounter with this divine command. Okay, now I think it's pretty clear that Kierkegaard had a larger project in mind here, apart from just a sort of a self-contained analysis of the Abraham and Isaac story. His larger project was this. He basically wanted to use the Abraham story, as he understands it, with all its anguish and uncertainty, as a kind of antidote to what he took to be the absolute spiritual lethargy and superficiality of the modern world. The true meaning of faith has been lost for Christians today, he thought. Faith has been cleaned up and sugar-coated. That's to say, true faith, or to be genuinely religious, Kierkegaard believed, had nothing to do with dogma or heading sleepily and mechanically to church on Sundays. And it had nothing to do with being absolutely certain in one's belief. Rather, it meant, like early primitive Christianity, taking a leap of faith. It meant living in risk and uncertainty. And it meant shouldering the greatest possible insecurity before God. It meant, most broadly, having to make crucial decisions without having a standard to appeal to in making them. This is why Kierkegaard admires Abraham, and not insignificantly, it's why Kierkegaard is considered to be the father of existentialism. Bye for now.